one of the biggest changes in my relationship up with God, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, is I realized the pattern of my connection up with God, specifically in my sin, specifically in my badness, specifically in my failures. I would run into the throne of God, beg for forgiveness and mercy, and then get the freak out of there as quickly as I could.
Yeah.
The turning point for me was when I began to realize the safest place I could ever be in my worst moment is in his presence.
Created on purpose and for purpose.
Hey, welcome back to the Daron Earlewine podcast. Daron Earlewine, your host, here with Daron Cooper, your guest.
Ooh, hello, everybody.
Hey, we're on this series, Daron Squared.
Ooh, yeah.
Actually not, but maybe we should. We're in week 2 of this relationship series. And we said the last episode, if you haven't listened to it, go back and get it. It's still available. We're doing this series on relationships. My word for the year is relationships. And I just want to dive into this as I'm growing, want to help you grow. And I thought, the cool thing we could do, Coop, with these episodes is have all of them be a conversation with someone that I'm in relationship with. Just to kind of make the point and give us a little more fodder for that.
Sure.
Excited about this first 3 episodes, which are about our relationship up with God. So we're breaking the series into 3 parts: up, in, and out. Up in our relationship with God, in relationship with other human beings, and out with our relationship to make an impact in the world. And I loved the first conversation we had, Coop, and it was, we went to the deep end of the pool pretty quickly.
Yeah, there was not a lot of goofing around. There was a lot of we just went for it. And so, if you're looking for jokes, you're looking for something funny, don't listen to the last one.
Yeah,
if you want to go deep,
I got some good news and some bad news. Good news is, we'll say some good news about the bad news. Bad news is this episode probably gets deeper.
Oh boy! All right. Get my scuba gear on. Let's go.
So last episode, we talked about that idea that God comes where he's wanted, but we go where we feel safe.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, Coop, just even saying that and not just saying it, specifically experiencing it, like I hate how weak I feel in relationships sometimes.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And especially the more you learn about yourself, and you find these things that you struggle with in relationships or kind of these like issues that you try to work through, I think of the Enneagram especially, right? Where as you learn about yourself, I'm an Enneagram 9. Okay. So I'm not good with confrontation as much. And I struggle to, say what I'm feeling a lot. And then all of a sudden you're in these relationships and you're kind of looking in the mirror of that and you're going, oh, I suck at life because I can't do these things, and it can easily just be just take you down the shame avalanche, if you will.
Well, Jill and I joke about it, sort of joking, but we've worked hard on our marriage. We've worked hard on ourselves. And, we've been doing counseling with a great Christian therapist for, 15 or so years now.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, like, we'll joke and say, it really sucks to get healthy. Because, the quote about
so true.
Ignorance is bliss, right? It's not bliss.
Yeah.
But it's at least like, well, I'm not sure exactly why this is broken, but it's broken.
I did the best I could,
Well, I guess that's it. But then when you start to educate yourself and start to get healthy and why you're doing what you're doing, you can actually name some of the dysfunctions and habits that, and reactions, you're like, man, okay, I'm not shadow boxing this now. I do know, but that almost makes it a greater challenge because now you're really in the battle, right?
Yeah.
And man, one thing I'm praying and hoping for myself is like, I want to feel safer in my relationship with God this year. And I want to feel safer taking the risks that I need to in my, horizontal relationships with my kids, with my friends, and my leadership with my wife, with my parents. And it feels so weak often to go, man, like I'm just not going like where I don't feel safe. And I know that my growing relationship with God and how I have grown in feeling safe with Him, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about in this episode.
Yeah.
It is starting to create, it's kind of that flywheel, right? It's starting to move to the place where I'm getting more courageous in my earthly relationships. And a lot of that is knowing that I can go to those scary places because I'm never alone in that. God's always with me.
Well, and in those moments, we've never really risked those relationships in a healthy way and found ourselves going, man, I wish I didn't do that.
Mhm.
Right. Like, yeah, there are times that relationships fall apart and it didn't work the way that you thought it would. But most of the time when you're coming from a healthy place going, I want this relationship to be better, whether that's, earthly relationships or even with God in some way, the minute that you just risk it and step into the hard conversations or the things that need to be done or the connection with God in some way, you rarely look back and go, I wish I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Like the risk is mostly all the time worth it in some way, shape, or form.
100%.
Right? And we know that, I think, deep down, but it still keeps us resistant to those relationship conversations sometimes.
Well, and the unconscious emotional engine of that is shame. Because
1000%.
if this doesn't go well, I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to have more separation. I'm going to be more isolated. I can't handle the potential of that risk, so I stay where I'm at.
Right.
But the deception the devil gets us with that is, you're guaranteed to stay at the distance. You're guaranteed to experience more isolation if you don't take the risk.
Right.
And
we're created as relational beings.
Yes.
Right. We're supposed to be in relationship with God and relationship with others.
Yeah.
And there's never in anything in life do we find ourselves, the more we isolate, the better we get.
No.
There's nothing that turns out to be beautiful on the other side of that.
No.
And so God is saying, hey, I'm pursuing relationship with you. I need you to pursue relationship with others.
Yeah.
And you can see where, to your point of the devil just getting in there, and that's the separation piece. The shame that separates us from each other, that separates us from God. And that is the issue. That's the problem. And so if we can just, it's hard because I struggle with it myself, but if we can just go, no, we're here for relationships. I have to step into this tough conversation, or I have to step beyond and kind of risk maybe like, hey, do you want to go connect at lunch sometime? Or, whether it's a family member or your relationship with your spouse in some way, those risks are never met with negative consequences.
Yeah. Well, and I think the thing, God gets it, right? That's why, like 365 times, I think it is in the Bible, he's saying either be strong or courageous or fear not.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Like every day he's like, I know it's scary,
Yep.
but you can do it. And so digging into that, I think one of the one of the points I want to make, and you just made it for me, Coop, is that we can never fail in seeking God's presence, right? And we're usually the failure piece for us is usually we're talking about our performance,
correct?
Right, which we'll talk about in the next episode. But God's not grading us on performance, right? And so we don't fail as we seek Him. But to be fair and kind of paint a clear picture, we talked about in the last episode that it's that sin, right, that is anchored in shame that we have to battle through. Our flesh doesn't seek Him; our spirit does. Yeah. And Jesus has dealt with that. The other part that I think makes it really precarious in this relationship up with God is it's not just a sin, but as we live, we experience and pick up quite a bit of disappointments, becoming real disillusioned, by what's happened. And a lot of times, either outwardly or inwardly, we're judged on what people see as like a performance. I was talking with John Jones, one of our friends and local pastor, and we love JJ, and he's deep. He's deep into the pool kind of guy.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And he's gotten there by by some, tough sledding in his life. And I remember him sharing with me, when his mom was dying of cancer.
Mhm.
And, they were people of faith, and they prayed for healing and prayed and
Right.
prayed and prayed and did all they thought they could do. And
Yep.
she still lost her battle with cancer.
Yeah.
And some will say they were well-meaning, but they weren't.
Mhm.
A Christian person was like, hey, I think, if you guys would have, prayed harder and had more faith,
Yeah.
she could have been
Yeah.
healed.
It was on you.
was on
and
you.
you didn't do your part.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
you could have performed better. And God
Yeah.
was just, and the thing with that, Coop, I was like thinking about this the other day. When we say that to another human being, like, do we think there's like a faith ometer? Right.
We must.
We must, right? Where God was like, oh man, yeah. You only got up to about 32% on the
Yeah,
faith-o-meter.
yeah.
You don't know this, but it's right about between 67
Yeah.
and 72%
You
Is-
didn't make it.
is when, I decide to heal.
Yeah.
And you're like, somebody could be this, well, yeah. Well, Darren, don't you remember when Jesus said, you know what I mean? You guys don't have the faith for this, like, I'm not saying that there's not a mysterious point there. We do need to have faith,
Yeah.
but there are so many other instances throughout the scriptures knowing that it's like, this is not based on our performance.
Yeah.
And so we have those moments.
And for some reason, that's been a caught point within the church. If you grew up in church in any way, shape, or form, I'm not going to say that was a taught piece, because I don't think people mean to say it that way.
Mhm.
But it was a caught attitude of like, you have to have that faith-o-meter going in some way, shape, or form, or you're, and maybe it's because we believe in like Santa Claus and stuff, like the naughty and nice list or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
right? Like we have this like proverbial Santa Claus in the sky kind of thing that, my good things outweigh the bad things, that I can earn, that it's on me.
Yes.
It's on my shoulders. It's on, if JJ would have prayed more,
Yeah.
if he would have believed more,
Yeah.
if he would have done these things more. And we just have this, we got to figure out how to break that. And I'll be the first to raise my hand to say I have not broken it, even though it's been made aware to me
Yeah.
that that's not the case.
Yeah.
I still struggle to break it
No doubt.
some days.
Yeah. Well, I think about instances, and there's a mystery to this, right? Of what God's will and his way is and what he's doing. I think about the interaction that Peter had with Jesus, where Jesus is like, hey guys, I'm going to go to the cross and die. And then, Peter's like, no, you're not. You know what I mean? Like, we will, you know what I mean? Like, it's not happening. And it's kind of weird to think about, but he was face to face with Jesus, but it's kind of a prayer.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's speaking to God.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like God's like, hey, this is my will. This is what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, God, let me count the ways of why that to my wisdom, right?
You know what? That's a really bad idea.
It's a bad
God.
idea. You're going to die. This is going to happen. Like, here's all the things. I could probably find some scriptures in here somewhere where it would be
Right.
really wrong for you to die, Jesus,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
think about that. Like, they had no concept, like, no, God's going to die, right?
Right.
And so Peter's bringing a pretty strong performance prayer to Jesus. And Jesus is
He's
like,
putting it together.
he is, right? And Jesus is like, oh, yeah, by the way, get behind me,
Yeah.
Satan. Right? You don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And even in that rebuke, like, it didn't break the relationship, but like there was a ton of disappointment
Mhm.
and disillusionment for the disciples.
Yeah.
Like, until Jesus came back from the dead, and even then they struggled to get their mind around the whole
Still,
deal.
yeah.
When you think about that interaction, I think about Mary and Martha with Lazarus dying.
Right.
I think in my book, out on Audible right now, if you want to, just a little plug
nice
there.
plug.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Good plug.
I have a video director that tells me I need to keep
Yeah,
reminding
yeah.
people of our resources.
Yeah.
Anyway, these but oddly moments.
Mm.
Like, I love that. I don't know, maybe the New Living Translation talks about like that, Mary and Martha send this message to Jesus. Hey, your friend Lazarus is sick. We need you to come heal him. Right. And we know you're just, you're not that far away.
Mhm.
And it says, but oddly,
Yeah.
Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. And
Yeah.
I hate the but oddly moments as I'm trying to figure out this connection with God.
For sure.
Like I was doing it right. I was praying. I was fasting. I was performing. I was doing all the things. But oddly, you didn't do anything close
Mm.
to what I wanted you to do.
Yeah. Nowhere near it.
So then, like, instead of going, I'm going to trust the character of God that I know that the word, tells us about, that I've experienced, and go, I'm going to trust this to the mystery of God and what he's doing. Most of the time, once again, we hear this accusing voice in our head, which is the enemy, which is based in shame. You didn't do enough. You don't get it.
Yep.
You're the problem. If God was happy with you, he would have done exactly what you wanted him to do. Like, which then back to what we talked about in the first episode. Now I'm going to draw away. And that's if I'm on my game. It's an entirely different thing where, like, yeah, I totally know I was involved in sin. I had bad attitude. Like,
Right.
I was totally wrong in this situation.
Right.
And it didn't go. So now, like, not even in my goodness, but in my badness of life, well, for sure, I'm the reason that we're having all these problems. Therefore, I'm sure God's disappointed. I'm sure he's disillusioned in me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
I mean, that reminds me of just a little bit of the journey that I've been on over the last decade or so of, growing up in church, having these exact thoughts, right?
Yeah.
That even though, deep down inside, I knew it wasn't based on my performance, I was still performing.
Yep.
Like you tell yourself it's not about it, but you deep down inside, you're like, oh, I've been praying an hour a day for 10 years. I'm good. And so growing up in that and feeling like I had done everything that I could and just God's got me protected all the time. And then you wake up one day to a failed marriage and your life has fallen apart and everything that you ever thought was going to be your story is now not your story.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I found myself. And waking up after spending years and decades of time and energy and effort going, God, I'm seeking after you. I'm coming after you. I'm doing all the things. It was all broken. It was all ripped apart. It was all like all the shame, all the things just kind of, coming at you there. And I will never forget the moment that, find myself just kind of emotionally exhausted, done across the board. I had prayed all the prayers. I had said all the words to God that you're not supposed to say. I had literally exhausted my energy and effort and emotions towards him. And there's distinct moment. I have this mental picture of just kind of like, I'm in a pit, right? Just in a pit. I've tried to dig myself out. I can't. And I was like, God, you're just up there at the top of the pit. You got the rope. You got all the things that you can do. And you're not even throwing a rope down here. Like I've done all my part and you're not doing yours. It's basically where you find yourself, right?
Yep.
And it was in that moment of me kind of visualizing that prayer. It was just like he was then in the pit at the bottom with me. And it was just like, he was like, oh, he didn't even have to say it, but I just felt him just be like, I'm here.
Yeah.
And it was that moment of, I give it all up. I don't have to. I thought he was going to help me get out of this pit, but the reality is that he's with me in it.
Yeah.
And there was like, there's something different about that, right? And instead of just fix this situation, he's like, no, I'm here with you in that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's been in the years from that. And you hear a lot of this in stories of, pain to purpose kind of stuff that you talk about a lot through spiritual DNA and different things, right? Where the pain often is not what we expect, but it's also the catalyst that becomes this beautiful thing in our life that allows us to experience God in ways that we never would have before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's crazy. It doesn't make sense, but what it shows you and what it proves through these stories like this is that God is for us, like you say every week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He's for us and he is with us.
Yeah.
And he's never stopped pursuing us, no matter what we think we've done on the naughty or nice list, checklist that we're trying to do.
Hey, I got a quote for you. Shared joy is a doubled joy. Shared sorrow is a half sorrow. When I heard that quote, I knew I had lived it, right? When I was going through the death of my dream, the living part of it, when it was being created, I did it with other people, and it was amazing. It doubled the joy. But when it died and I had to figure out, what do I do with my life? I was so glad to have people walk that journey with me. They really did help half the sorrow. I know you've probably experienced the death of a dream as well. And here's the good news. God wants to resurrect a new purpose in your life, and you can't walk that journey alone. That's why I'm so excited to announce the release of the Death of a Dream small group curriculum. This curriculum is video-based. You're going to get together with a group of people, watch videos where I'm teaching concepts through each chapter, as well as powerful insights that didn't make it in the book. They're going to help you walk together through the process of discovering God's call in your life, seeing God resurrect a sense of purpose and hope. It's going to be amazing. And there's also a great journal that goes along with it. It's going to help you have a process and a guide to observe, reflect, discuss, and open up the insights. They're going to lead you into what God wants to do in your future. So listen, here's your quick action steps. And get a group together. Invite some friends to join you, okay? Go to DaronEarlewine.com/thedeathofadream. Buy the curriculum, schedule a time, get together, and begin the process of walking together towards the resurrection of your purpose. Once again, it's at DaronEarlewine.com/thedeathofadream. Thanks. Dude, I love the image you just gave us there of in the pit, because a life-changing perspective for me happened when I began to understand the grace of God. It's not a one-time transaction of forgiveness. Like, I didn't deserve the forgiveness. It's unearned. I can't buy it. I can't, all these things. Undeserved. God has given me his grace. Here it is. Here's my grace.
Thank you for your grace.
Yeah. So now the record is clear. I've forgiven the sins. So enjoy that grace. I've got to go do something on Neptune.
Yeah.
Right. And then, yes, I received his grace. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. It was a sound that I heard when I was 8 years old, evidently. And now it's just silence in the pit. But I remember a friend saying, to start seeing the idea of grace is not like, I received it a long time ago and it was a transaction. And now it's like me here and God somewhere else. But if I could see grace as what we're doing right now, like, grace is shoulder to shoulder with Jesus at all times.
Yeah.
So, Paul says, hey, I had this thorn in my flesh. There's a problem. We're not exactly sure what it was. I prayed 3 times.
Yeah.
Hey, take this away from me. And Jesus' response was, hey, my grace is sufficient.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean when you forgave me for being Saul when I was killing Christian stuff? No.
Yeah.
Right now, in the pit
moment.
with the thorn, my presence, my grace is sufficient. Like, because the goal of the whole thing was the relationship.
And that, to me, and maybe you could paint a better picture of this, but like, to me, that is what happens within folks that grow up in church and get all the head knowledge, and then life smacks them in the face, and then they come out on the other side understanding that grace, that like, no, it's like he's with me all the time. And they have, like, I experienced this in my own life, like, all of a sudden you're way less judgmental, and you're way less like, they should do that differently, because that's not what God wants for, like, you just go, oh yeah. Like, you just, in every aspect. I mean, my wife and I talk about this often, where it's like, we looked at divorced people growing up as like, went
through a divorce.
They did not do enough prayer.
Right. And then the church helped with that by being like, hey, you guys going through a divorce. Hey,
you can't be in leadership.
You can't be here anymore.
You got to go. And then on this side of it, right? Like, having these broken, failed marriages, and we walk in and we just see, like, God had so much grace for us. He walked with us in that. that we're able to extend that grace.
Wow. Yeah,
and
dude.
we're able to shoulder next to people. And you see that, right? Like
Yeah.
you see that in journeys of people's lives where they grow up in kind of this judgmental thing. They get smacked in the face by life. They come out on the other side walking with people, being gracious to people.
I think what you're hitting on, Coop, which I think is 100% true. I think the presence of a ton of judgment is actually the manifestation of a ton of shame.
Mm,
Right? When I've got a
Yeah.
truckload of shame that I'm not allowing God's grace to actually deal with,
yeah.
well, then the manifestation is I've got to use judgment as a shield
Yeah.
in my life, right?
Yeah.
But when I've experienced his grace in his presence,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden it's like, I don't really have a shield here because
Yeah.
if you're feeling what I felt,
Yeah.
then you know what you actually really need right now?
Yeah.
You need grace
Yeah.
as presence, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay being shoulder with shoulder
Yeah.
with you in the pit.
Yeah.
Which, is what he did. And then Jesus says things like this. Hey, I want you to love people just as I've loved you.
Mm. Gives it a new, fresh perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because you hear that and you're like, okay, love people like God. Okay, what do I do? How do I do that?
So I guess I got to be perfect.
Okay.
I love people
Oh,
by me
man.
being perfect around them and
Yeah.
making sure they see the perfect example of exactly how life should be. And by my perfection, then they'll see
Yeah.
like I really need
Oh,
God.
and you know what? You know what? How to love people is to tell them that if they would have prayed more,
Yeah.
they would have had more faith than their mom wouldn't have died.
Right. Yeah.
So that's how I love people well.
Or Job's
Yeah.
friends that thought they had all the answers.
Yeah.
And when they were really actually being good friends is when they just sat there and didn't say anything. Hey, Job, we don't understand exactly what's going on in your life because
Yeah.
you were like the best dude on the planet and all this stuff's happening. So, hey,
Yeah.
you know what? We don't understand the mystery, precarious nature of God. We'll just be present.
I will tell you, I love telling this story because it's not very churchy. But I will tell you the most loving, most Jesus experience that I've had with another human being on this planet was when I realized my life is falling apart and I drove to a friend's house. I didn't even know where I was going. I just got in the car and I drove and I had just ended up at their house. And they obviously picked me up and pulled me into their living room and set me down. And he's a good buddy. His name is Caleb. And he didn't say a word. And he walked over and he poured a glass of whiskey. He came over and handed it to me. And he just sat down next to me.
Mm.
And I tell people to this day, that was the most like loving Jesus move I've
Wow.
ever seen anybody do.
Wow.
Because he didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
His words didn't matter at that point.
Right. There's really nothing to say.
And his, to grace being presence and all the stuff that we're kind of painting the picture of, he was just there.
Yeah.
And his presence is what changed everything.
Yeah.
And that was the most loving thing he could do for me in that moment.
So good, Coop.
You know?
Here's some scripture to help us understand this, okay? So here's the problem. Okay, the problem is Hebrews chapter 4, verse 13 says this. Speaking of God, he knows about everyone, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about us is bare and wide open to the all-seeing eyes of our living God.
No biggie.
Nothing can be hidden from him, to whom we must explain all that we've done. If that's just your life verse,
Yeah.
ooh,
Taking that on as my life verse.
yeah, like talk about
Wow.
naked
Yeah.
and unashamed.
Yeah.
Like he sees it all, like all. So there's nothing hidden. So it's like the idea, like when I hide in my sin or my badness or my failure or my disillusionment, whatever it is, as if I'm somehow like that's the shield, right?
Yeah.
I'll be
Yeah.
judgmental. I'll do whatever. And God's going, no, listen, you can't hide.
Yeah.
And this isn't like you can't even, I gotcha. There's no I gotcha moment.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I know. I know.
Yeah.
And still here.
Yeah.
Which
Haven't gone anywhere.
why we have to keep reading. Because verse 14 and 15 and 16 are the solution. Okay. So he knows it all. The goodness, the badness can't be hidden.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
the next two words, but Jesus.
Mm.
But Jesus, the Son of God, is our great high priest who has gone to heaven itself to help us. Therefore, let us never stop trusting him. The high priest of ours understands our weaknesses. It's not hidden. He understands it. Why? Since he had the same temptations we do. You know what you don't know what it's like to be human, God. Oh, you actually do. So why
yeah,
did
about
you
that.
come, Jesus? So that he could walk among us, so that we could have someone that we go,
Yeah.
oh, you do get it, right? Had the same temptations we had, though he never once gave way to them and sinned. Now here it is. This is the bedrock solution of this episode. Verse 16. So let us come boldly to the very throne of God and stay there. Why?
Yeah.
To receive his mercy and to find grace to help us in our times of need. Let us go boldly, not sneak in the back door, not crawl, not grovel, not show up and be like, hey, I've got a really long list of things, God, that you probably don't know about, that I've done, that I said, that I've thought, that I did. Hey, God, it's me again, your son. You know about it all. And Jesus, I couldn't be here, but Jesus did what he did. So I'm coming boldly to your presence. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah.
And Coop, man, one of the biggest changes in my relationship up with God, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, maybe not even that long, I don't know, is I realized the pattern of my connection up with God, specifically in my sin, specifically in my badness, specifically in my failures. I would run into the throne of God,
Mm-hmm.
beg for forgiveness and mercy, and then get the freak out of there as quickly as I could.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, let me atone for my own sins
Yeah.
by a really, really good apology.
Yeah.
Right?
And I will never do it again.
Yeah. I mean, you ever worked on a really good prayer? Like you practiced it a couple times, right?
Yeah.
Like you just put together, and like God is going to be like, whew,
Man.
the way you put that one together, Daron, I didn't realize all that. You really enlightened me. And I see it. You really did a good job of persuading me. You know, it wasn't what Jesus did on the cross.
No, not at all.
That brought forgiveness.
It was that prayer.
It was that prayer, and you really sincerely meant it. So, okay, this time, gonna go ahead and extend grace, but you better skedaddle out of here if I change my mind and smite you with the lightning bolt.
Yeah, because that happens.
Because that's what because what I'm really interested in as God is punishment. I really want to develop a strong terror of me so that you never want to come to my presence when you desperately need it.
Yeah.
The turning point for me was when I began to realize the safest place I could ever be in my worst moment is in his presence. And what began to happen for me, Coop, was actual growth and transformation. Because when I came to God's presence, when I desperately needed it, and my focus wasn't on what I did, but I stayed in his presence long enough for him to begin to reveal to me why I was doing it. Like, I'm doing this again, and I'm just trying to get over this thing or whatever. And being able to be in his presence long enough for the Holy Spirit to say, hey, you might need to get a little curious about that. What do you think about maybe this? And then, yes, Bible study, reading, prayer, going to church, going to counseling. There was work I had to do. But when my focus became staying in the safest place, which I could be, which is his presence, to be in his grace, he began to reveal to me why I was doing certain things. And then, right, the mercy and the grace to help me, that showed up, and he began to transform some of those things that were broken in me that were the whys. And when the whys began to change and be transformed by his presence and grace, the whats began to change a little bit too.
Yeah.
Not a lot bit. I'm still in the struggle, right? I'm still like, oh, I don't make sense to myself. But now I go,
Yeah.
Yep, I just had another not make sense moment. You know who can make sense of this?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Hey, Jesus, here again. I don't make sense to myself. Could you help me make sense to myself?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, son. That's all I want to do.
Yeah. And often, I don't know if anybody else is like this, but often I try to figure it out first before I go to God.
Oh, dude, that's good, Coop.
You know, it's like, man, I'm struggling as a dad. I don't know how to be a good dad. You know, I'm struggling in this relationship or at work or whatever it is. Right. And okay. I'm going to go to God with 3 ideas, you know, 3, and then he can pick the best one and tell me what to do there, you know.
Or I'm going to go to a bunch of different sources before I go to God.
That too.
Right.
That
Let me
too.
call a friend. Let me read a book. Let me think of
Yes.
this. What's culture saying? Oh, I read
Yes.
this. Okay, here we go. And then I show up with my resources to God.
This
Hey.
is this is where we're headed now.
I think I figured it out here. If you could bless what I've figured out.
Yep. And instead of, like you're saying, that he is the safest place to go immediately, no matter what that is, you know. And I like even you know, this morning in trying to have time connecting with him midst of kids and all this stuff. And you always feel like it needs to be perfect. It needs to be quiet and the lights need to be low and the music needs to be playing, like all that stuff. Right. Instead of just like, man, God, it's nuts. My toddler's screaming and hitting me with stuff, but just, I need to be made aware of your presence right now.
Yeah.
And every time that I have done that, I have been met with him and feeling like I can think clearer, right? Feeling that I can see life a little bit better. I slow down. I don't start seeing my kids as annoying little flies to shoo away. But like, you know, now all of a sudden I can bring them into relationship with me too. Like he has brought me in relationship with him. And it's like, oh man, it just changes everything when you can stop and you can see that God is always right there. In the pit, walking shoulder to shoulder with you, that at any moment, in any part of any day, just stop and be like, ooh, God, I need you. And he will be there every time, you know.
Here's the invitation. This is my actual life verse. Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion, which I'll replace that word with performance. Come to me. Direct invitation into his presence. Come boldly and stay here. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly.
It's so good.
Unforced rhythms of grace. That's the invitation. And you may be saying to yourself, well, you don't understand, Daron. I've got this and I've gone through this and this. You're right. I don't know your story, but here's why I say this on every episode. I'd like to help you unpack some of that. In fact, one of the things we're working on, Coop, right now that we're going to try to see if we can't get launched in 2024 is actually offering coaching. We'll put together, whether it's an individual or it's a group where we go through some coaching to unpack some of all of this and understand what God's doing in your life. But I'd like to know. So you can email. Say, I don't understand, Daron. Okay, help me understand. Email me, Daron@blackbirdmission.com. Send me a text, 317-550-5070. Reach out through socials. Hit me on a DM. I don't want this. We didn't create this so we could have a monologue, every single week. We want you to be a part of this community. We want to help you become who God's created you to be. So reach out. Let us know. Next episode, we're going to land this plane. Coop, thank you. We got one more episode, but thank you for taking the time to be a part of us. Thank you for what you're sharing. Thanks for your vulnerability in this episode, man. That's not easy. So thank you for that. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Until we do, never forget, guys, for you, he's not against you. He is near you. He is not far away, and he's created you on purpose and for a purpose. We'll talk to you next time on the Daron Earlewine podcast.